Welcome to Video Aided Instructions Upgrade Your Writing series. This is the first program in the series called Prewriting. Let me ask you a question. When do you start writing? Well, that's easy. You start writing when you start writing the first sentence. Well, actually, no. Research has shown that writing starts long before you actually write that first sentence. It starts when you plan your writing. We call this pre-writing. It's the series of decisions that you make as you actually think about your writing. Pre-writing has a number of steps to it. One of those steps is considering the assignment, what you have to write about. Another one of those steps is thinking about your audience, the people who will read your writing. Third one is your purpose. That's your reason for writing. And the last one is gathering your ideas. We call that brainstorming. Learning the steps in this process can help you write much more easily and much more successfully. It's not very difficult to do, and in this lesson you'll learn all about it. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and list the 4 steps in pre-writing. Then come back. Use this model. Pre-writing includes considering, and the 4th item. Here are the answers. Number 1 is considering the assignment. Number 2 is considering your audience. Remember the importance of audience. Number 3 is considering your purpose. Purpose is your reason for writing. Remember there are 4 purposes. And number 4 is brainstorming ideas. Let's start with the assignment. There are 2 things that are going to happen. Either you're going to have an assignment or you're going to have to make up your own. Let's assume the teacher has given you an assignment. In these cases, you must answer that question, not any other question. You must directly address what you've been asked to do. Let me give you some examples of that. First, let's say the assignment is choose a favorite family food, such as lasagna, tacos, or wontons. In an essay, tell the reader how to make that dish. Well, in this instance, what you're doing is you're giving steps in specific order, from first to last. So the first step might be gathering the ingredients, the second step might be browning the meat, and so on and so on and so on until you get to the last step of the process, which, as we all know, is enjoying the meal. Second assignment. Why did Brutus's speech in defense of killing Julius Caesar fail? Well, in this case, you've got to go back to Shakespeare's play. And to persuade your readers that your opinion is correct, you've got to give specific examples from that play. So you might quote lines, you might refer to scenes, and you would then use that textual proof to make your point. Third one, choose a place that you've always wanted to visit. Tell your reader all about that place. Well, in this case, what you're doing is you're describing the place. So you would gather a lot of details about the place, and those details would help your readers understand why you want to visit that place. Here's the 4th one. In the blink of an eye, everything changed. Well, this is clearly a story. You would start the story with this sentence. Here, what you would do is you would tell a story that would include characters, plot, setting, dialogue, and theme. So let's review for a moment. What you've done is you've taken a look at the assignment, you've analyzed the assignment, and you've figured out what it is that you must do as you plan or pre-write this assignment. Now, what happens when you're given a very broad subject rather than a specific assignment? Well, in this case, What you've got to do is narrow that very broad generalization into a specific topic. So you might get something like health or music or the Electoral College, the Civil War, a famous scientist, foreign policy. You know you can't write an essay on that because the topic is much too big. So what you do is you narrow it down to fulfill the limitations of your paper. Most junior high, high school, and college papers run between 350 and 500 words. That's the amount that you're expected to write between 45 minutes and about an hour. So now you want to narrow that topic down to something that you can express in 350 to 500 words. So let's say your topic is computers. We can narrow that down to, are computers being overemphasized in school? Or we can narrow that down to a how-to paper, perhaps how to build your own computer. Or we could narrow that down to a descriptive paper, how computers have made our lives better. Those aren't the only ways that you can do it, of course, because you would consider your purpose and your audience, as we mentioned in the beginning. Let's say your topic is animal rights. You might write about a persuasive paper. Are zoos cruel rather than educational? Or you might write about the importance of testing certain pharmaceuticals on animals before they're tested on humans. Or you might write a story. You might write about how your cat has more rights than you do. And you would pick the one that would best suit your purpose and your audience. Say your topic is for history. You're writing about the Civil War. Well, you can't write about the Civil War. It's much too large. So what you might do instead is narrow that down to the purpose of the Civil War. You might argue that the Civil War was more about states' rights than it was about enslaved people. Or you might argue about the causes of the Civil War in a mechanical sense. You might say that the cotton gin helped bring about the Civil War. Let's say your topic is sports. You might pick a favorite sport like soccer and discuss why soccer is becoming so popular in America. Or you might write a story about when you were part of the winning soccer game. You could make up anything that would suit your purpose and your audience, as long as it was narrow enough that you could do it within about 45 minutes to an hour. Let's say you're back in history class or social studies and you've got to write about voting. Maybe the Electoral College, how the Electoral College works. That would be a how-to paper. Or the importance of getting young people to vote and to become involved in their civic responsibility. Or maybe you'd write a story about the first time that you became aware of voting and maybe you went into a voting booth with one of your parents. How about health care? That's a big topic now. Maybe you could argue about the government should spend more money for health care. Or you might want to tell a story about getting a very bad cold and having difficulty recovering from it. Or you could talk about how the government should increase funding for rare or so-called orphan diseases. And another good argumentative paper might be school should be held year-round. You should go to school all the time and not have summer off. Or maybe a story about the first day of school and what you remember from being 5 years old. You get the idea. What you're doing now is you're taking a very broad, general topic that's too big for a paper, and you're narrowing it down to suit your audience and your time and your purpose. Now, what happens if you're not even given a broad, general topic? What happens if your teacher just says to you, well, write? In that case, you've got to start with your own ideas and what interests you. Think about the kind of stuff you like to read, for example. If you find the topic interesting, chances are you'll write about it with more detail and your audience will find it more interesting as well. Furthermore, you'll know a lot more about it because you've read about it extensively. So you'll be less tense about the writing because you'll have more details and examples to draw on. And this will make the writing easier and more fun as well as more interesting. Now, topics really do matter as I'm sure you've realized by now, because a good topic can make your paper very interesting, but an unsuitable topic can make your paper not so interesting. How can you tell if a topic is unsuitable? Well, first of all, you can't write about it in the time that you've been given. It's just too big. Second of all, it's very boring, or it's been written about so much that nobody really much cares about it. Third, you don't know enough about it and you don't have time to do the research to learn about it. And four, the topic is inappropriate or offensive or even vulgar. And in that case, your audience is going to be turned off in the very beginning. So here you are, you're sitting there in class and you're racking your brains and you see the clock ticking away. You've got to find a topic and you've got to decide if it's suitable. Here's a checklist that you can use. Keep this in your head the next time you're faced with a topic. First of all, is my topic too limited? Is it too narrow? Sometimes you're so excited about the topic that you make it so narrow that you don't have enough to write about. Well, in these cases, what you've got to do is make it just a little bit broader so that you can get about a page or a page and a half double-spaced. Number two, maybe it's the opposite. Your topic is still much too broad. You think you've narrowed it sufficiently, but you're really not quite there yet. Think about how this topic is expressed in literature. If other writers need an entire book about this topic, chances are that it's just too big for you to do in a paper, in a class period, or even in an evening. Number three, what happens if your topic is too technical? You may not have the background to discuss it. In this case, throw the topic out and start again. Unless you have the background to write about it, it's not going to come out very well. You'll do a lot of vague generalities rather than specific details. You don't have the time to teach yourself nuclear physics or calculus or how to fly a helicopter. So pick a topic that's not too technical. What about topics that are sort of yesterday's news? If everybody knows everything about your topic, chances are no one's going to want to read it. I've been teaching a long time and I get a lot of papers that I've read over and over and over again. And frankly, the minute I see gun control or a topic about raising the driving age or lowering the drinking age, I go, been there, done that, and I'm already bored with it. Now, the writer knows this because I've said to them, don't do this anymore, but still I get those topics. So think about a topic that's a little bit fresh and hasn't been done to death. Next, what happens if your topic is a little bit too controversial? You're afraid that you might offend your audience because it's something that they might not agree with your opinion. In this case, don't take the risk. Pick a topic that suits your audience and yourself. Papers that shock and offend take unnecessary risks. Next, do I really like my topic enough to write a paper about it? Maybe your teacher likes your topic, and your parents like your topic, your buddies like your topic, even your dog likes your topic, but you don't like your topic. If you don't like your topic, don't write about it, because there won't be any enthusiasm behind it, and it'll come out a little bit forced. Pick something, if you have the option to do so, that you really enjoy writing about. So now, what I would like you to do is to pause the program and identify the following as subjects of essays or topics of essays. Remember to distinguish between the two, subjects and topics. Explain why you made the decisions that you did. Then come back. Here are the answers. Number one is a subject. Alternative fuels is too broad to be a topic. You could take alternative fuels and you could write an entire book, maybe even a series of books on this particular subject. And because it is so broad, you know it's a subject and not a topic. Number two, Henry Ford's development of the assembly line resulted in the mass production of cars. Well, that's a topic because that's narrow enough for you to write a paper on. It's just enough there for you to get into some real substance, but not too much that you've got to develop a whole series of essays and books and even an encyclopedia on the topic. Number 3, America's legal system. Well, that's a huge, huge subject. America's legal system is the subject of many, many volumes and many websites. So that would be a subject. Number 4, America needs a flat tax. That's relatively narrow, so you know that that's a topic. And that would be a good topic to use as an essay. Number 5, butterflies. Clearly a subject because it's enormous. There are so many, many different kinds of butterflies and so many things that you could say about butterflies. You could describe their migration patterns, you could describe how they look, you could describe their processes of gathering nourishment. So that's so broad that that would be a subject. And number 6, is intelligence determined by nature or by nurture? That's relatively narrow, so that would be a topic. And that would be an interesting topic to use for a paper. So now, what I would like you to do is to pause the program and choose the reason why each of the following topics is unsatisfactory. Choose from the list of reasons that follows. Here are the reasons. Number 1, they're too broad and cannot be completed within the time allocated. In other words, they're just too large. Number 2, they're boring or they're written about too often. As a result, your audience won't find them particularly interesting. And number 3, they're unfamiliar, so you can't write about them knowledgeably. You don't know enough about them, and it would be very difficult and time-consuming for you to find the information that you need. So again, number 1, they're too broad. Number 2, they're boring. And number 3, they're unfamiliar. Then come back. Here are the answers. Number 1, the major poets, painters, and dramatists of the Renaissance. Well, this is far too broad. You can't complete this in the time allocated. This is enough subject matter for an entire semester or maybe even a year's worth of study. Just doing the poets alone could take you weeks and weeks and weeks, not to mention the painters and the dramatists. Remember, one of the dramatists of the Renaissance was William Shakespeare. And if you were to cover Shakespeare, you'd have to cover all of his plays, and there's 37 of them, and his poems, long and short. So this is clearly far too broad for the time that you have allocated. Number 2, America should lower the drinking age. The topic may seem fresh to you, but from the standpoint of an instructor, it's boring. It's been written about much too much. I personally have read probably about 100 papers about this, and there's really nothing that a writer can say at this point that I haven't read. Therefore, your paper will not be particularly interesting to your instructor, and you should avoid a topic like this and this particular topic. Number 3, there are many different theories to explain the disappearance of the dinosaurs. Well, those words, many different theories, tell you this is an extremely broad topic. You can't complete it within the time allocated. You might be able to discuss one theory, but you can't possibly discuss many theories. Therefore, this topic is far too big for the time you have. Number 4, America needs stronger gun control laws. This is very similar to number 2, America should lower the drinking age. It's boring. Many students have written about it. Many commentators have written about it. Many columnists have written about it. There won't be much, if anything, that you can say that your instructor has not read before. Therefore, avoid this topic because it's just been done far too much. And number 5, nanoscale trees improve efficiency in low-cost plastic solar cells. This one is probably unfamiliar to you, so you can't write about it knowledgeably. I personally don't know what a nanoscale tree is. I would have to do a lot of research. So unless you're an expert in this particular type of science, I would stay away from this topic because the amount of research that you're going to have to do will be excessive. So because it's just too technical and too unfamiliar. Now, let's talk about why these 5 topics would be suitable for a paper. Number 1, media producers should prosecute people who download copyrighted music. Well, first of all, you are going to find this topic very interesting, most likely, and your teacher will probably find it interesting as well. The topic is controversial. It has 2 sides. There are advantages to prosecuting people who download media. They are stealing stuff, but there are also disadvantages because you might be going after, let's say, a 5-year-old who's just taking a song. So you've got 2 sides. You can argue both. You can decide one side is stronger than the other. You can find information relatively easily. The odds are you've read about this in the newspapers, or you've read it on a web page, or you've seen it in a television show. So you can get enough information, and you probably feel strongly enough to have a little bit of passion in your paper. So this would be a good topic. Number 2, students should be placed in classes according to their academic ability, not their age. In most schools, students are placed in classes according to their age. So if you're 5 or 6, you'll be in kindergarten or 1st grade and so on. But maybe students should be placed in grades according to what they have learned. It's an unusual topic. There hasn't been a ton of stuff written on it, but there's enough stuff that you could find the information that you need. Also, your teacher hasn't read it over and over and over again, so she or he would find it interesting, and you would probably find it pretty interesting because it may not have been something that you've thought about a great deal. It's narrow enough to fit into your time frame, and it's broad enough that you can find enough information to write what you need. So this would be a very suitable topic as well. Number 3, why my father is my hero. Well, this could be your father, perhaps your mother, maybe an aunt or an uncle or a sibling, maybe a teacher. This is a good topic because it's sufficiently narrow. You're dealing with only one person, and you would know the person well enough that you would be able to do the research. So using this one, why my father is my hero, you might discuss 3 specific examples, 3 reasons why you admire your father. Your teacher would find that interesting because your teacher wouldn't know your father and would like to read something about an admirable person. You would find it interesting because you know this person very well and you can get sufficient detail. So this would suit because it's not too broad, it's not too narrow, it can be researched relatively easily, and it would be interesting for you and for your audience. Number 4, how to solve a quadratic equation. This one works extremely well because you've got a clear-cut process with steps. You can discuss step 1, you do this, step 2, you do this, step 3, you do this, step 4, you do that, and so on and so forth. It's broad enough that you've got enough to fill 350 to 500 words. It's narrow enough that you don't have to write an entire book on the process. There are clear-cut steps, so you have information that you can write about, and you know where to get that information. Either you know it from your math class, your math teacher, or you would look in your math book to find information. Number 5, golden retrievers are better pets than cocker spaniels. An excellent topic because you're comparing two similar things, two types of dogs, so they have similarities. But they also have differences because they are different breeds. That gives you a nice structure, similarities and differences. It also enables you to do some research, which you might do from personal experience. You might look at web pages. You might use books, perhaps, or magazines. And your reader would find it interesting because of your details. You would find it interesting because you would like to write about your pets. Later on, I'll show you some more ways to brainstorm topics so that that part of this process is easier for you. Now, let's talk about the people who are going to read your paper. We call them your audience. In most cases, you know your audience already. Your audience is your teacher. However, you may also have a number of different audiences. For example, your audience might be your classmates, because your teacher may decide that you will exchange papers and read each other's papers. Or your audience may be the entire class, as if, let's say, the teacher asks you to read your paper aloud, or the teacher posts the paper on the board. The audience could be even larger. The audience could be the entire school, or maybe even the entire community, because your paper may be part of a contest or part of a web page. So as you write, you're going to have to figure out who your audience and audiences are. We say that you have a primary audience and a secondary audience. Your primary audience are the main people who read your writing, and normally that's your teacher. But you may also have those secondary audiences, and that could be your classmates or your parents or people in the community. So before you write a single word, think about your audience and decide who will be reading your paper. Number 1, who is your primary audience? Number 2, what's their age? Will their age have an impact on the way they approach your work? For example, your classmates are going to know more about some topics than perhaps your teacher, and vice versa. So think about what they need to know about your topic. For example, a while ago I got a paper from one of my students, and it was about a CD, and I didn't realize that DVDs and CDs had only one side. I thought you had to turn them over like records. So I was really embarrassed that I didn't know this part of the paper. The writer realized that later in a second draft and fixed that for me. So think about the age and think about the level of knowledge and experience. Also think about their gender. Are they male or are they female? Why are they reading your writing? Are they reading it to learn something? Are they reading it to be entertained? Are they reading it to be persuaded? Because that determines the details that you know as well. Perhaps most important are these last 2 qualities. How much do they already know about my topic? Are they experts or are they total newcomers? For example, I don't know a lot about sports. Actually, I don't know anything about sports. And when my students write about sports, they have to explain things like RBIs, because I don't know what an RBI is. And when I see those initials, they always put in parentheses whatever it is it stands for. Whereas if they were writing to somebody who knew a lot about sports, they wouldn't have to put that information in. And last, but certainly not least, how do they feel about your topic? Are they receptive to your topic or are they hostile to your topic? Are they somewhere in between? Do you have to persuade them a lot or are they already on your side? If you know their opinion of your topic, you can choose your details much more carefully. So let's review for a second. When you consider your audience, consider their age, their gender, their level of experience and information, and their feeling about your topic. Because of course you want to tailor your writing to suit your audience. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and identify the audience for each piece of writing. Remember, the audience are the people who are going to be reading your writing. Identify the secondary as well as the primary audiences. The primary audiences, recall, are the ones you are sure will read your writing, the person for whom you're writing specifically. Secondary audiences can be anybody else who would happen to read your writing. Then come back.